Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbyville. Tyson Voelkel is not a veteran yet. He is still active duty Army, proud soldier of the 82nd Airborne. Today he's a graduate student at the George Bush School of Government and Public Service, preparing to move on to teach at West Point in 2007. It was a quick path from Texas A&M Corps of Cadet Commander to Iraq. Company A, commander of the 3rd Battalion of the 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment, a paratrooper. His unit attached to the Army's 1st Armored Division, working for a time in the Al-Rashid district of Baghdad. 2 years ago, Tyson Voelkel was there for his first tour. His second tour ended just a few months ago. He's home now and here with us today to tell his story. Welcome, Captain Voelkel. It's such a pleasure to have you. Need to fast forward to when you first went to Iraq in 2003, February of 2003. Talk a little bit about your job with the 82nd Airborne as a planner. Talk about what that involved.
Thanks for having me on the show. February 2003, we were alerted and ordered to go to Kuwait staging area in preparation for the U.S. invasion into Iraq to overthrow Saddam Hussein. At the time, I was a assistant operations officer and planner for 2nd Brigade, 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment. We had the responsibility for coordinating and planning all of the various combat power and military power, technology, resources, weapons needed to accomplish the mission that we were tasked with at the time. I worked with some outstanding senior officers and learned a great deal during that time.
March 19, 2003, that was the date that Operation Iraqi Freedom actually started. You said you were staging in Kuwait when you got there in February. Talk about that time from February and actually where you were when the invasion started.
Well, there were numerous different plans that were on the table as far as how to best utilize the 82nd Airborne Division and our brigade in the initial attack into Iraq. And at the time, we were training every single day for various different contingency type operations and for the mission that we had at hand, conducting rehearsals and even practicing our airborne type operations in case we were going to actually do a parachute assault into Iraq. On March 19th, we actually got a change to our plan, the actual plan that we'd been working on for a while. Were ordered to get into Iraq as quickly as possible along a specified route to conduct operations.
82nd Airborne is it's known for a short notice specialist, as it were. Within 18 hours of you receiving your orders, you're on your way to accomplish those orders, right?
Right. The mission statement for the 82nd Airborne Division is to be able to deploy anywhere worldwide within 18 hours of notification in order to meet the strategic goals and needs of the United States. And the President has that authority to call on us as a rapidly deployable strategic response force.
I thought it was interesting that you told me that when you were first starting this mission that a lot of you, including yourself, looked at this a little bit like Desert Storm might be, a quick operation, a couple of months and you might be home. Obviously it didn't turn out to be that way.
Right. The initial plan was to basically do what had been done during Desert Storm. And you heard the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, say we're going to start with shock and awe, and after shock and awe we'll move into and get our ground troopers in there. We will secure the terrain and the war will be over. And as you know, the war was declared that it was ended fairly soon. However, the toughest part about this war has been in the rebuilding and the restructure of the country. It was in dire needs of repairs at all different levels, so naturally they kept us there to help get this infrastructure rebuilt and to get the people of Iraq started on the right foot towards democracy.
You talked about resistance on the way into Baghdad. Can you recall the first time a bullet was coming in your direction?
Well, I tell you, the toughest combat operations that the 82nd and our brigade faced was in a city known as Samoa, and that was some of the toughest fighting that our paratroopers had to deal with. We didn't lose a single soldier. during those engagements and during that time, and we faced over 600 and some estimates as high as 800 enemy resistance, which was the remnants of Saddam Hussein's Fedayeen army and some of his Royal Republican Guard who were there in the city of Osamawa. As soon as we defeated the enemy, within a couple of days we were driving through the city, and it was almost like a parade. The children were out in the streets clapping, people chanting and saying USA good, Bush good, Bush good, and it was an overwhelming sense of pride and honor that I believe every one of our paratroopers had during that time, because we did what we had set out to do and accomplish, and to basically set these people free.
You talked to me about that sense of accomplishment, and I'm glad you brought that up. I want to talk, though, about your job in planning and how that sort of ingrained with the political, how it went with the political thoughts, and
Right.
how everything had to be sort of PC, as we say today. Sort of talk about that element of your job.
Well, the tough part about the types of wars that we face now, and also if you look back to the Vietnam War, is that you've got television cameras, media personnel, and the world watching every single move that you make. And we were very aware of that. The United States military is the best equipped, best trained, and most professional fighting force the world has ever seen. And that being said, we take precautions in order to make sure that we don't do anything that would be misconstrued or viewed as America or the United States taking advantage of its power and using it for evil purposes. Mm-hmm. One great example is many of the schools that we came across in Iraq were full of ammunition, full of mortar rounds, rockets, Katyusha rockets. Basically, Saddam knew that the United States would not stand for precision-guided munitions being shown blowing up schools, whether or not the schools were weapons caches or not. So they stored a lot of their weapons in these schoolhouses, and we knew that, and so we did not purposely bomb any of these structures. We went in on foot with our soldiers to secure these areas and then remove the weapons and remove the ammunition. And that carried through and permeated every aspect of our operations. Was what effect will this have on the civilian population? What effect will this have on our presence here in Iraq, and what will the perception be around the world when these videos and this footage is sent across the newswire?
So it was a whole lot more than just fighting the war. It was fighting the war and then paying attention to the perception of the fighting.
Right, and sometimes it's very difficult to achieve great success in both simultaneously, and there's got to be some give and take. And we learned those lessons early on, and truthfully, we're still learning every single day on how to maximize all the good that the United States military is doing and the coalition forces are doing there in Iraq, because there's a tendency for only the negative and only the bad to come out of a lot of the reports.
Iraq then and Iraq now are quite different places. You told me that in 2003 when you first went in, as far as communication, as far as accommodations, as far as food, as far as air conditioning, of which there wasn't any, it's a whole lot different then. Communication, first time you were able to call your wife Christy. Talk about what happened.
I'll never forget that. It had been at least 3 months, and my timing's off on a little bit of this stuff, but since I'd been able to call and talk to my wife. And our brigade commander had a satellite phone and was letting the soldiers use this satellite phone so that they could call home and check in with their families. And I was kind of further down the list because most of the officers said they'd wait and let all the soldiers go first. Nonetheless, I wanted some privacy, and we just got these portalettes, Porta-John toilets that had come in, and figured, you know what, I'm going to go hide out for a few minutes and talk to my wife on the phone. And I was just telling her about how safe it was and not to worry about me or about our soldiers, and that everything was going just perfectly, and that we were in one of the safest areas we could be in. and then 3 mortar rounds came in, and you could just feel the air get sucked out from around us.
This is while you're talking to her on
While
the
I was
phone.
talking to her on the phone, and thank God they landed on the other side of about a 10-foot wall. But it was loud enough, and the concussion was bad enough so that we lost our connection, and I wasn't able to talk to her again for about 4 days. So.
And if she were sitting here and telling me about those 4 days, I bet that would be quite a story.
Yes, it was gut-wrenching for her. And of course, I went right back into getting work done and everything. And I said I was going to get on the phone as soon as I could to talk to her. But
I bet you had to. You arrived in Baghdad, the sector that you were assigned to between the airport and the Tigris River. Talk a little bit about, sort of set the scene for us there in Baghdad when you arrived.
Well, Baghdad's a fairly large city, very populated and urban. On the outskirts of the city, it's very rural, much like most United States cities. The sector that we were responsible for consisted of close to 1.2 million people in total. That's the entire brigade sector. And in my particular sector as a company commander, I had about 250,000 people estimated that my paratroopers were responsible for. And that was everything from security to infrastructure, rebuilding sewage systems, schools, teaching them about democracy to our city councils, as well as to hunting down insurgents, black market arms dealers, drug dealers, kidnappers, money counterfeiters. The list, goes on.
2003, the summer you took command of Company A. You were a company commander, about 136 under your command in Alpha Company. Talk a little bit how your career changed when you became a company commander.
Well, my career path changed in the matter of minutes. The night before I took command of the company, our brigade commander, who at the time was named Kurt Fuller, said, "Tyson, you're going to be the commander of Alpha Company." And I thought he was role-playing with me and some more training. And I said, "Okay, sir, what's the situation?" And he put his feet on the desk, and he had a dip of Copenhagen in his mouth, and he spit in his cup, and he said, "No, you're the commander of Alpha Company. Get out of here and go take command, take charge of that company." And that next day, I was responsible for 136 men's lives and the success or failure of our forces within that sector of 250,000 Iraqi citizens. And it was a life-changing event. That very night, we conducted raids, and from then on, it was 18, 20-hour days trying to do the best that we could for the people of Al-Risala and Al-Shirta sectors, and do what was best for our paratroopers.
Talk about the typical day.
Typical day consisted of planning for future operations. It consisted of meetings with non-governmental organizations, not-for-profit organizations such as Red Cross, CARE, UNICEF, just various organizations, as well as U.S. federal agencies like the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and figuring out ways to rebuild within our sector. We had 60 schools within our sector, both male and female. We had 32 mosques. We had sewage infrastructure that was almost non-existent, to the point where most of the homes were built and then they thought about sewage pipes and all that after the fact. So there was lots and lots of problems. In the meantime, we were gathering intelligence and planning operations at night for our raids against insurgents and mostly black market arms dealers and pro-Saddam Hussein or pro-Ba'ath Party loyalists who were conducting attacks against coalition forces. So by day we were rebuilding and teaching and training the future Iraqi forces, and by night we were conducting raids against these various targets. We are known for our capability to fight at night. There's not another military in the world that has the night vision capabilities and the communications that we have. So we preferred to fight at night because that was our territory, and we could control the pace, tempo, and the illumination of our operations by shutting power off to certain parts of the neighborhoods so that when we went in it was pitch black, and it kept things calmer that way.
Captain Voelkel has brought several photographs with him. As a matter of fact, one of the photographs we're about to see is going to be an example of that night vision. And I'd like to go ahead, if we can, and go to some of the photographs that he has supplied for us. These photographs, it was a well-photographed war, obviously, and both on television. There we go. Take a look at these and just sort of briefly describe what we're looking at.
That's actually my First Sergeant Stephen Bauer and myself, and this was during our most recent deployment. That is in the green zone in a bombed-out palace there, which was our base during our second deployment.
Okay, we're going to talk about the second deployment a little bit later on. Let's move on to, got several pictures to tell you. This obviously is the result of a car bomb.
Right. These are insurgents' cars who were filled with ammunition and explosives, and actually they were rushing towards a checkpoint, and our soldiers basically eliminated the threat there. Of course, the insurgents were killed, but the secondary explosions that occurred after the cars were hit with our fire, of course, caused them to blow up.
Okay, next picture. There we go. That's an example of the night vision.
This is a photograph that'll be familiar to many U.S. and also Department of State personnel, because this is taken of Chinook helicopters transporting personnel from the Baghdad airport into various sectors of Baghdad. Currently, one of the safest ways to get people into and out of the airport, and also how we conduct some of our operations.
Okay, let's move on.
That's out in the eastern portion of Baghdad, the very actually far eastern Baghdad, out in the desert where we have, where the United States has actually got some training facilities. And those are some of my lieutenants, and you can just see this was during the middle of the summer, so it's hot and very
dusty.
Very dusty,
Yep.
and no shower facilities, so you get to learn how to love the dirt.
And your neighbor.
And your neighbor. This is a picture with one of the greatest assets we've got, which is dog teams, and they sniff out bombs, explosives, drugs, you name it, and we use those dog teams and their handlers very often in our operations. This particular one, that's Dixie, and she helped us find one of the largest weapons caches in southern Baghdad.
Wow. Okay.
This is a picture of inside what's known as the green zone. That building there in the center is actually a mosque, and our responsibilities with the various mosques and political officials, and as well as religious clerics within the city, was great. We had to meet with them on a weekly basis at a minimum in order to find out issues, concerns that they had with United States operations, as well as they would help us in solving many of the infrastructure problems that we had.
Okay.
And that's just a picture outside of after an engagement that we'd had.
I just thought that was a great black and white photo. Had to include that. Okay, let's move on.
This is a part of Baghdad known as Haifa, and this is taken from one of our sniper positions there. And basically, it kind of gives you some scope and perception as to what the city actually looks like downtown, and what our soldiers have to deal with, and how difficult it is to identify enemy versus friendly. And that's why this is a good picture.
Mm-hmm. And another shot of Baghdad.
Another picture of Baghdad.
Okay.
This was actually during the first deployment. What you're looking at is the back of actually a Nissan pickup truck that was a suicide bomber, and he brought in about 500 pounds of explosives into the police station, which was about 500 meters away from my company headquarters, and blew himself up and did irreparable damage to the police station. Killed about 14 Iraqis and 2 National Guard U.S. soldiers that day.
Texans.
It's a good Texas picture of a few of the soldiers in our company that were from Texas, and that was also during the first deployment.
Okay.
This is part of a weapons cache that we had found in southern Baghdad. This particular black market arms dealer had everything from Kalashnikovs to various submachine guns and anti-aircraft rockets, mortars. So it was a very sizable weapons cache that the soldiers from Alpha Company, with the help of Dixie, the dog there, we were able to confiscate.
Your first deployment was about a year. I believe you came home in February of 2004. Right. You spent 10 months here, right. Jumping back with the 82nd right. again, and then you were deployed again for the express purpose of providing security for the Iraqi elections, which took place on January 31st of this year of 2005. So talk about your second deployment and what was involved there.
The second deployment was a short notice deployment. We basically had about 96 hours from the time we were told you're going to Iraq till the time we were actually on the ground there in Iraq. It was a perfect example of the combatant commanders in Iraq saying we need another battalion, 2 battalions, to go to Iraq in order to help with security. It was vital that we had overwhelming combat power to help ensure the successful elections in January. And that was our express mission and why we went. We went to the Green Zone and provided security for the various diplomats and governmental personnel that worked inside and around the Green Zone. And we also had one company from our battalion that was sent to work with a CAV unit up in an area called Haifa Street, where they saw very intense operations fighting insurgents up in that area and did a very good job.
You talked about the sense of accomplishment you had felt 2 years earlier on your first deployment. A very similar sense of accomplishment on Election Day, which also happened to be your 31st birthday. Talk about your feeling on that Election Day.
Right, it was unbelievable, overpowering, and one of the most rewarding feelings that I've ever had. During the first deployment, after we'd finished the battles there in Asamawa, and we were driving through the city, and the people were in the streets clapping and cheering for us, was just inspiring. Getting the opportunity to go back and help support the first democratic elections in Iraq and seeing the fruits of our labor for this entire time just confirmed it to not just me but our soldiers and many of the officials that are working to help give Iraq their freedom. And it was amazing to see all levels of wealth, as far as the people coming to vote, women in large numbers. We had 10,000 people in our sector that had come out to vote, and they were proud of the fact that they had these ink-stained fingers that showed that they had voted, and it was just a great feeling for all of us, and a great sense of pride and accomplishment throughout the entire city. The tough part was the coalition forces could not have too much of a presence. Otherwise, we would be viewed as rigging the elections, or that we were too heavy-handed and that the elections were successful because we rigged it and so on and so forth. So the tough job was provide security so no bombers, no suicide bombers, no snipers get in and disrupt the elections and disrupt the transportation of all the polling material and the voting cards and everything, but you have to stay out of sight. So very difficult, and the coalition forces once again and the paratroopers did an outstanding job in doing just that.
Captain Voelkel comes from a family of public service for sure. His great-great-grandfather was A&M class of 1881. His granddad was an Aggie. His father served in the Peace Corps. And I want you to talk about your brothers, Bo and Trevor. They are both military, both Aggie grads, and I know you're proud of them.
I'm very proud of my little brothers. My younger brother, Bo Voelkel, was Aggie band commander, a biomedical science major. He had much better grades than I did. He had the brains in the family, and he served as an airborne infantry officer, ranger, and was in Korea, and just recently left the service. and my youngest brother, Trevor, also an Aggie. He was a Corps Public Relations officer when he was here and involved in just numerous student organizations and different aspects of A&M. And actually, I take that back. He's got the brains in the family. I think he had the highest GPA. But he's also, he's still currently active duty and served 10 months there in Iraq. We were there at the same time but never saw each other. And he's also airborne ranger as well. And I'm very proud of both of them and the fact that they chose to serve their country as well.
You were born in Bryan. You grew up in Brenham. You a Brenham Cub, and I know that your wife Christy. You talked a lot about family and what families go through in war, and your wife was the one that was here, waiting for you, worrying about you. And your wife Christy is now media relations director for the Corps Cadets at Texas A&M. Obviously, a very special lady to you.
Yes. One of the greatest lessons that I learned during my different tours in Iraq and my service throughout the military is that the unsung heroes of our military services are the wives, spouses, children, and the parents of these men and women who choose to serve their country and put themselves in harm's way so that Americans can live the life that they want to live, and so that Americans can have the option to choose, and we have the freedom to choose what we do because there's these veterans and because of these outstanding young men and women. But these family members really bear a huge burden, especially when we're dealing with warfare like we're in today, asymmetric threats.
Captain Voelkel, congratulations and good luck in your studies and your future endeavors, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
The war on terror continues, and every day men and women put themselves in harm's way to fight it. Regardless of how you feel about our purpose in Iraq, we unite in our prayers for their safe return and our pride for their brave service. Thank you, Captain Tyson Voelkel, for your continuing service. And thank you to our underwriter, First National Bank. I'm Tom Turbyville. Please join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.